Welcome everyone who's joined so far. We're still waiting for people to join. So we'll give it one more minute or so. I can say something about the session ground rules. This session is recorded. You should have received a prompt to approve that when you logged in. If you want to ask the speakers or the host something, type it in the attendee chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Any technical issues, check your settings, try to rejoin if you have any problems. If you want to tweet about us, you're more than welcome, of course. The hashtag is LIBER, hashtag LIBER 2021, or tag the LIBER conference account to make sure that your views and thoughts and reflections are recorded. We have a tight schedule today, so we will try to get started, I think. So today's workshop is a shared future for open access books, exploring partnerships between libraries and publishers. And this is a co-hosted workshop between LIBER. I represent LIBER. My name is Sophie Wenström. And I am the chair of the LIBER Open Access Working Group. And I'm joined by my colleague Olaf. Hello, Olaf. Would you like to say hi?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, can you tell the people where you're from?
Yeah, certainly. My name is Olaf Siegert. I'm the head of publication service at ZBW, Leibniz Information Center for Economics. I'm based in Hamburg, Germany. Mm-hmm. And I'm also I'm also the head of the working group of open access for the German non-university research association, Leibniz Association. And yeah, I'm also part of the LIBER working group of open access.
Wonderful, thank you. And Olaf will be our chair for the speaker sessions and the panel. And we also joined by Claire Redhead from OASPA. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Claire Redhead. I'm the Executive Director of OASPA, the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association.
Yes. And we got together a few months ago and had some mutual questions on how libraries and publishers can work together. If we're all aiming for open access, how can we do it? So this workshop is all about exploring that. How can we think about the partnership? And also we chose today to focus, there's of course lots of questions, but we chose to focus a few things. I just want to show you the agenda first. So this is the introduction. Hello. We're gonna talk a little bit about the workshop. And then we have three speakers today. Martin Eve, today representing the COPIM project of scholar-led publishers trying to figure out also how to solve this enigma. We have Neil Stern from OAPEN, who will be joining us. And we have Alexander Jobman from a German collaboration called Enable OA. Also, this is a workshop, so we will have a breakout session. And we want your thoughts on current and future initiatives of funding for open access books. You will receive the questions that we're going to ask in the breakout session. There is a slight break in the middle because we don't want to stare at the screen all morning. And then we're going to summarize, and then there's going to be a panel discussion. And then we're going to try to conclude. I hope that looks good to everybody. On that note, I'd just like to say a little bit about the background. So a couple of years ago, when we still had the opportunity to go to conferences IRL, we had a workshop at the LIBER conference in Dublin. We did then a survey to libraries asking them how they worked with books. And one of the biggest challenges that we found was funding. it's not enough funding or not enough staff to work with issues around open access books. And this is a riddle that we still haven't solved, I think. And looking at the things that has been done in the last few years, is that we use different terminology, of course, as always, and people are talking about business models or funding. But this is a quote from a report that was done in 2018 by the OPERAS organization. And they concluded that an OA monograph publishing in science and social sciences and humanities demonstrating a greater range of business models, creating a patchwork landscape. So the same models that works to pay for open access for articles might not work for books. Also, there was a report by the COPIM project. They have a specific working group for revenue models and business models. And I thought this was a fitting quote from that. So Martin, you might be able to develop your thoughts about that later. So to repeat a potential cliche, it's clear that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, nor does one model emerge as the easiest to implement or as the simplest or most sustainable. Each model comes with its own challenges and benefits that must be weighted up alongside consideration of a process mission, partner stakeholders, and costs. And I see this as also a good starting point for working together with publishers, because we are all partners in this. We have the same aim. We want to share something that is important to us. Claire, do you want to say something? So, and the aim for the LIBER point of view is sort of, how can we afford this? How can we turn models that used to pay for subscriptions to ebook packages or purchase print books? How can that be used to pay for open access books if that is what we want to do? Claire, would you like to say something from the publisher's point of view?
Yeah, so OASPA's mission is for open access to be the predominant model of publication, and we've got a wide diversity of members that are involved in open access publishing or supporting services and infrastructure for open access, and across all disciplines and journals and books. And that diversity is really crucial to our community and to open access being successful. And the same as you've identified with the slide you showed from the previous working group, you know, the work we're doing at OASPA centers around funding being the main problem for open access books. And the relationship between libraries and publishers is, of course, different for open access. The funding streams are different and often very challenging. And there's a huge variety of approaches and models to help with awareness and understanding of those is really important. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity to bring our two communities together and to find ways to showcase the work that's going on within open access books, because I think that's where all the really exciting innovation with different models is happening. So I hope this is the first of many conversations that we can have, and that you'll all get something really useful out of this session today.
Thank you, Claire. I think now we are really curious about hearing the perspectives of our speakers today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand over to Olaf, Niels, Martin, and Alexandra.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Sophie, and thanks for the introduction. And now we step into our first part of the workshop with 3 brief talks on aspects of funding of open access books. Each is about 10 minutes, and then we have a discussion afterwards. And if you have questions for the presentations, then please post them in the chat. Yeah, we start with a presentation by Niels Stern. Some background information about Niels. He's a director of OAPEN, and he began his career in scholarly book publishing in 2003. He was the co-founder of the OAPEN project in 2008, and he was also the head of publishing at the Nordic Council of Ministers in 2011. Since 2014, he was an independent expert for the European Commission on open science and e-infrastructures. In 2017, he became the head of Department for License Management at the Royal Danish Library and chief negotiator for the National License Consortium in Denmark. So the floor is yours, Niels. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Olaf. And I will share this. So, yep. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the invitation to this really relevant workshop. I've been looking forward to this because I think the topic is spot on. And now Olaf presented my background, and I have spent some years now also in the library, in a big library with obligations for many university libraries, and trying to see how we within the library could bridge between the license and acquisition team and the, let's say, open access team or research support team, which is often quite difficult even within a library. But that's the good news, I think, from the library side, that this is progressing, at least from what I saw in Denmark, but also in other countries I've seen a similar progression. Some other good news, actually. I was looking at my predecessor, Elko Ferreter. He gave a keynote at this workshop 2 years ago, which we refer to today, and he showed the number of open access books indexed in the directory of open access books, and it was around 16,000. And today, actually, 2 years later, it's almost tripled. So we are beyond 43,000 books indexed in the OAB. I think that's a very good sign that we are seeing great development in this landscape of open access books. But of course, there are still things to work on. There are challenges, and I'll just give a brief presentation of how I see some of the issues that we have to think about from the library side and from the publisher side, in my view at least, and propose a few items that we could talk more about to, well, proceed towards some kind of solution to how publishers and libraries could work together in this open access books landscape. So the libraries are really here to serve the needs of their institutions. I think this may seem very obvious, but I think it's very important to keep in mind that whenever libraries do something, it has to be anchored within the priorities of the parent institution and to serve the needs of their patrons. This is the first priority for any library, I guess, at least from what I know. Also that budgets are normally locked in license departments, so it's not unusual that half of the budget would be with the license department and the other half in staff budgets. So that means that this is the kind of the issue that you have to be aware of, how if we change models from ebooks purchasing or licensing to open access models, we need to look into the distribution of the license budgets. And these budgets are in most cases constrained. There are cut downs. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially in these days with the pandemic. And importantly, of course, is that the budgets are related to the institution. So the institution can change priorities, and that could affect the library, of course. Also, this may be different from country to country, but from what I know and from what I've seen, acquisition decisions are to an increasing extent being taken based on demand-driven acquisition. So it's the patrons, it's the users who decide what kind of content is being purchased. And although libraries do support open access and have done so for many years, I don't think they believe themselves to be funders in the long run. And this is also something to consider. And currently, when we see contributions for open access book initiatives and infrastructures and so on, this is typically not coming from the license budgets. But I think also today we will discuss models that try to do, to kind of also bridge that. But normally this would be end of year spending or other ad hoc budgets contributing. So on the publisher side, I think a very important point is that the diversity of the kind of publishers in monograph and book publishing. And this diversity should be sustained, of course, because that's inherent to the whole scholarly community, scholarly communication within SSH. I also think we should acknowledge that, or see that publishers really do acknowledge that there is a need of transitioning to open access book publishing. This was not the case even just a few years ago, but increasingly most publishers, also the commercial publishers, acknowledge that there is such a need. And many, while acknowledging this, publishers are searching for sustainable business models, and a lot of experimentation is going on, and we see that quite often there are new models being proposed, and I think this is a very healthy sign that all this experimentation is going on. And more than that, also publishers have to engage with new library supply chains and infrastructures like OAPEN, DOAB, and Project Muse or JSTOR or other infrastructures. But this is a new way of dealing with libraries going through other supply chains, which are not as well known yet as the, let's say, licensing or purchasing supply chains. So there are some opportunities, there are some challenges. I think there is a common wish, at least on both sides actually, and a will to find solutions. And there are long-standing relations between publishers and libraries. The challenges, of course, is that there are all these new kind of models coming out, collaborative models, BBC-based models, and so on. And that is a complex landscape to work in, as opposed to the traditional sort of transactional model where you buy something and get something in return. And also, again, how do we open up this license budget? That is a hard nut to crack, I think. A few ideas for, well, at least elements or questions that I think we should discuss today, how to reach a solution. So I'll just point to three things, and of course other things could be equally relevant, but I think data is important, communication and collaboration, just a few words on each. On the data side, as you probably know, most acquisition decisions are taken based on some kind of data, typically usage data. So cost per download has been a very dominant metric for decision making for many years. This is now being enriched with other types of data on the library side. So publication data, citation data, other kinds of metrics. Alt metric could possibly also be one. But what about taking decision about open access books, and which open access book publisher or open access book program do you want to support? What kind of data does the library need to take such decisions, short term, in the long term? That might be two different types, but at least in a transitional phase, what kind of data is needed? That would be really interesting for us, also for OAPEN to know, because we do collect a lot of data that we would like to give back to the libraries for them to take good decisions. So this is something which could be interesting to hear more about from you today. There is a rather big Mellon-funded project in the US called the OAEBU, so Open Access Ebook Usage Project, which is trying to set up a data exchange model for open access book usage, which could be really interesting as a key source for all this data. And we have some ideas that was recently disseminated in a position paper about an open book watch, which could be more than just collecting data, but also do analysis, being let's say, community open forum to discuss use cases and show examples. And this is something which could be interesting also as a collaborative space between publishers and libraries and funders.
Niels, you have 1 minute left.
Good. I will speed up. I've got just 2 slides left.
Okay.
So on the communication, I think this is just an example of a way to communicate in the community. The Open Access Books Toolkit, which OAPEN launched in the autumn. It collects a lot of information about open access books, and it's really here to help authors, but also libraries, of course, to learn more and know more about open access books. And I think such an information resource can be really helpful as a as a place where you can gather information, where also OA publishers can give more information about their models, and libraries can learn and exchange information. And we have a large editorial advisory board, which is made up of experts from all stakeholder groups in the community. And then finally, not least, of course, collaboration. And here I think about collaboration also from a strategic point of view. So as I said in the beginning, libraries are really anchored within the university, within their parent institution strategy. And we need to see how we can make solutions that tie well with a larger strategy of a university, and that could be interesting to work on. And also, of course, the practical level, how can we help in training? How can we help in different ways to make this happening? And this will be both bottom up and top down. So that's just a few thoughts. I hope we will have a chance to discuss this today and especially get some input from you. I think this is really important that we learn, as from my point of view as an infrastructure, how can we help to bridge between publishers and libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. There was already some interesting food for thought for us here. And I would come directly to the next speaker, and then we have the discussion at the end. Next speaker is Martin Eve. He's a professor of literature, technology, and publishing at Birkbeck, University of London. He has been a steering group member of the OAPEN UK project, the JISC National Monography Strategy Group, the Scondal Strategy Group on Academic Content and Communications, and the HEFGE Open Access Monographs Expert Reference Panel in 2014. The Universities UK OA Monographs Working Group 2016 and ongoing, and he's also a Plan S ambassador, a project lead on COPIM, and the co-founder of the Open Library of Humanities. Martin, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Great to be here today. So I'm going to just skip quite briefly over the sort of why open access and why does it matter, but it is always worth us going a little bit back to why we're doing all this work and thinking briefly about the context in which we're operating. And it strikes me that the COVID pandemic has really exposed the fragility of humanities and social scientific research infrastructures with respect to long form publication. We've got a world where during the pandemic, publishers instantly rushed to drop their paywalls, and we immediately saw massively increased usage. We seem to be heading, in my mind, towards a world where every piece of natural scientific research is available openly for free to download, while every piece of humanistic and some social scientific research remains behind a paywall. And I think that's quite a damaging future world, and one that we need to work to rectify. We also, of course, are operating within an environment where funder mandates are coming into effect, and we await the UKRI policy, for instance, next month, that we expect to have some kind of monograph mandate attached to it. But we're also working within disciplines where book processing charges are just simply not going to scale to work. And so we need to think laterally about how we're going to fund open access books, given that the individual cost per unit is so much higher than an article in a journal. And I think that in the past couple of years, or mostly within the last year, actually, we've seen three key strata emerge for funding open access books that I tend to delineate into different sizes of operation. So at the very high end, we have very large, often well-funded academic presses like, say, the MIT Press, who have launched innovative subscription threshold type models to achieve open access. So the MIT Press's direct to open scheme is a model where institutions subscribe to backlist content from the MIT Press. And if enough institutions sign up and they hit the threshold for participation, the entire front list from the MIT Press will be open access for that particular year. This is in many ways a high risk gambit for the press. They are staking a lot on reaching that threshold. It also can be relatively expensive for libraries to participate in. On the other hand, it's commendable to see such a large, prestigious press really making strides towards open access and offering a route to achieve that. We then have a set of small to medium-sized academic presses that could be university presses or commercial outfits who need lower risk models that offer incremental ways of moving towards open access. And I'm going to talk more about the model that we're implementing at the COPIM project shortly, that's called Opening the Future, that sits in that mid-tier bracket. But then I'd also like to pay tribute really to the batch of scholar-led born OA presses, Punctum Books, Open Book Publishers, for instance, who have had their own membership schemes running for several years now, that are providing a way of achieving open access by distributing the costs among many libraries rather than having a book processing charge that concentrates costs on a particular library entity. So really, I think these efforts to flip existing presses have a debt to those scholar-led presses who have paved the way with those schemes. The model that we're implementing is called Opening the Future. It's being implemented by two presses at the moment, the Central European University Press and Liverpool University Press. And in a nutshell, the model works like this. Each of those presses has put together a backlist of titles, so a package of books, to which a library can subscribe on a one-off basis. So libraries are subscribing to a package of books purely for their own collection. What's innovative about this is that the press uses the model from that subscription and that exclusive access to fund titles from the front list to become open access. This means that libraries can choose to pay for this from either their subscription or licensing budget, as Niels was talking about, or they can pay for it from their open access budget. And in that way, what we're trying to do here is to offer a route to participation in collective funding models to libraries that have never been there before. On other models like the Open Library of Humanities that I run, we've seen around 300 or so libraries participating worldwide, and that's great. But there are many, many more than 300 libraries who could participate in purchasing books and purchasing journal articles, and whom we haven't managed to bring across yet to open access funding models. Our model is an attempt to bridge that gap and to bridge those two different budgetary spaces. We've had to think carefully about the pricing as well. I'm well aware, more than many perhaps even, that the humanities are not the best funded of disciplines and that our publishing cultures are also not well funded. Academics struggle to find book processing charges, and that's why we've seen models like this emerge. And so we've arranged price points with the presses that really try to reflect that constraint. So our most expensive price point is 1,200 euros, which is approximately half the article processing charge you'd pay for an article. For our smallest libraries, we're looking at around 350 euros. And this also yields a very effective cost per book return. So if we reach the number of libraries that we'd like to be participating, around 250, we'd be talking 11 euros per library per book under a scheme like this. Obviously, these titles are all delivered with metadata in MARC KBART format and also counter-compliant statistics. We have partnerships with organizations like JISC, Lyrasis, and Project Muse for delivery of this entire system. A quick word on the presses that are part of our pilot. So the Central European University Press was the first to launch this. A very traditional press, nearly 30 years old, with 450 or so backlist titles, specializing primarily in Eastern European reconstruction in the post-Soviet period. really saw a huge boost in usage over the pandemic period and realized that it wanted to move towards becoming a purely open access publisher. And Opening the Future provides a model alongside others to achieve that. I should say the model we're piloting here is completely compatible with a book processing charge if someone has it. It can also be put alongside other schemes like Knowledge Unlatched, as long as we keep those streams separate and make it clear that we're never going to spend the money from this scheme to subsidize books that also have funding from elsewhere. I should say also that CEU Press and COPIM have been shortlisted for the ALPSP awards for implementing this, a prominent recognition of the fact that we're taking a risk here and trying something to make this work. We're also working with Liverpool University Press, obviously a very well-known and prestigious academic publisher. They've been working on OA titles for more than 10 years, to have a history of trying to move towards this. They publish approximately 150 books a year, as well as their journal collections. And they're working at the series level to try to transform a series of modern linguistics titles to a purely open access basis. The thing about this model that I think makes it different and that I think works well is that it's not a threshold-based model. We don't need to get 250 libraries and then we can say, yes, the entire front list will be open access at this point. Whenever we hit the amount of revenue that's required to make a book open access, that book will then become OA. So this is a rolling model that dynamically scales as libraries join. So if we only get to 60% of the titles being open access, well, maybe we need to say that in itself is a good target. Rather than aiming for perfection, let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good. And we hope that we can gradually roll presses over with a model like this. Should also say that books are selected either to be put in for sale only or to be open access. Open access titles are available to buy in print, but it will be very clear to libraries which titles are going to be OA and which are going to be available for sale. So there's no accusation of double dipping or confusion. A few brief objections that people raise that I'm just going to go through in my final minute or so. A question: isn't this just writing a blank check for the press? Is this a kind of big deal type model? Not really. This is an annual rolling model where libraries can appraise what they're getting for their money and they can stop funding the model if they want. It's more like a journal subscription. Every year you check on the local relevance and make your decision based on that. Some libraries have said we already have all the books that are available in the package. That's great, but this actually provides a cheaper way in future of getting access to the titles. Remember that €11 per book per library figure. This is a way that libraries can supplement their collections while also ensuring that everybody else has access via open access at a very affordable rate. Why the publishers we're working with? Well, mostly because they came forward. We need experimentation at this point, and I think that university presses that are making an effort to transition to open access need to be applauded, and we need to make the pilots work if we're going to see a more systemic transformation across the landscape.
Martin, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. And is this too expensive? As I said, relative to the costs involved in journal publishing, when we're talking about just half the cost of a single journal article in order to transition a press to open access, I really think we've hit a price point that should be affordable to most libraries. We also want other publishers to use this model. It's relatively low risk. We wait for the income to come in before books are open access. It avoids book processing charges, and we've laid the groundwork. We're publishing a toolkit that presses can use in order to implement this model themselves, and we're making all of our resources, say even the software platform for signups, available open source and themselves open access. And that is where I'm going to stop. That was pretty good for an academic to stick to my time limit. You can find out more about the model at openingthefuture.net, where we've got FAQs, brochures, lists of available titles. Or you can email me directly, martin.eve@bbk.ac.uk. Thank you again for listening, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion as we go forward from here.
Yeah, thanks, Martin, and thanks for sticking to your time frame. I know it's very, very tight today. So we come directly to the last speaker in the first session here, and that's Alexandra Jobmann. And Alexandra is the Deputy Head Librarian at the Hafen City University in Hamburg. And prior to that, she was responsible for project communication at the German National Contact Point Open Access OA 2020 DE. She's one of the founding mothers and fathers of the Enable community and represents a library perspective in the Enable Transition Steering Committee. And she will tell us a bit more about Enable now. Alexandra, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Olaf, for this nice welcome. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here and part of this workshop. And I will share my screen and my slides with you in this moment, so we can talk about what is Enable about, thinking how we can make a better partnership between publishers and libraries. And as you can see, I've put my input under a very provocative question, because I think this is one of the biggest challenges we face. Far too often, individual actors in the publishing system are like enemies to each other, or parts of the open access community are not recognized by other parts. And why I think that's a problem, I will explain in a few moments, but let me first start to talk about the Enable community. And to make it clear right away, my talk is almost exclusively about the topic of a library-publisher relationship, and not about concrete financing models for open access books. But I will take up some of the points I think needs to talk about. So Enable was born out of the so-called Open Library Project, an approach to use crowdfunding from libraries to make new ebooks appear directly in open access. It's a little bit similar to this model Martin Eve presented yet. And it was a project developed by the National Contact Point Open Access in Germany, the publisher Transcript, and the Specialist Information Service for Political Sciences at the University Library Bremen. A successful cooperation at an eye level, and that continues to this day. So we wanted to scale up this experiment, which has been very positive for all sides, and thus bring more libraries, more publishers, and more topics on board. That's why we founded Enable, the community for open access in the humanities and social sciences, primarily in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Our aim is to bring all the players in the scientific publishing system to the table and jointly develop viable open access publishing models. And with all players, we mean all: researcher, universities, libraries, professional associations, repositories, publisher, as well as the book trade and service providers. Because we need all actors to be able to map the different publication cultures in the humanities and social sciences and create a culture of the many. Among other things, this requires to find out how we can work together and how we can develop standards, procedures, and indicators that are fair, predictable, comparable, and sustainable. At the same time, we call on science policy and science funding to focus more on and promote the social sciences and humanities with their diverse publication cultures in relation to open access. But I think that's enough about Enable at the moment. Let's take a look at the main obstacles that we believe need to be overcome for a partnership-based open access publishing. When people from a publishing house and from a library come together to discuss open access and which part is the most appropriate, they come together not only as the individual person, but also as representatives and/or a representation of their house or guild. There is an organization behind it, with its own structures and premises for action. These always resonate and must therefore be taken into account. Of course, this also applies to all other actors. So the better we know each other and our partners in open access publishing, the easier it is to work together. And through a better understanding of each other, there should also be fewer communication problems when the same terms are interpreted differently or when technical languages meet. I know it always sounds so easy on paper, this developing understanding for each other, finding a common language, etc., etc. But in practice, it is quite difficult to implement. That's why we have, as a community, developed a few approaches that we would like to discuss with you, and that also still need to be established within our community because they are really, really new and because so far they only exist on paper. So at first, create transparency and participation opportunities. As an individual, disclose how you act, why you act, what your motivations are, and how you want to contribute to the common goal. As a community, everyone should be able to see and follow what's going on. And in order to contribute, you need appropriate spaces and opportunities to participate. In these spaces, there should be the possibility to work stakeholder related and issue based. So stakeholders must have the opportunity to exchange ideas and clarify their own interests, while at the same time, there must be topic specific cooperation in order to promote open access publishing. This can be the topic of funding, but also the topic of metadata standards. In the Enable community, we have already been able to implement this successfully in parts. For example, 3 medium-sized publishers have jointly developed and published a checklist on the topic of remuneration for open access services for publishers. This is openly available for discussion with all of the open access community. A very good point are communication rules. Clear rules on what is okay and what is not okay as communication. So if you want me to work with you as equals, you should get your stereotypes about me out of your head, and that same goes for me. So we all have to overcome our stereotypes about each other. And all of this in a mood of positive unflinchedness, because together we can achieve a lot, and we should not let ourselves be distracted on our way. Is this a slow progress? Yes, because if all stakeholders and their interests want to be taken into account and we want to get to know each other better, it takes time. In addition, a number of local approaches, methods, and initiatives have already emerged in recent years that want to be bundled and merged into a common open access publishing landscape. But considering where we come from and the importance that the topic of open access books has had so far, the process is faster than expected. The development and implementation of our first open library program was only 2 or 3 years ago. Research funding, at least in Germany, has only now included the topic of funding open access books in its program. And we all know that cultural change takes time. And that's what this is all about. A change towards an open, discipline-oriented publication culture. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. You were even faster than I thought, so I just wanted to remind you for the last minute, and you have already concluded your talk. Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, problem is we had 3 interesting talks, but we are already at 11:15. I'm looking towards Sophie. Shall we stick in our time frame and maybe have the questions then later in the panel, because we meet the 3 presenters later in the panel, and then we go directly to the breakout sessions. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, actually. The attendees are holding on to their questions for a while longer. I don't see anything in the chat. So I think this is a great opportunity, because I think also if we can reflect together in the breakout session, maybe there are even more questions later on. And Alexandra, Niels, and Martin has promised to join the conversation as well. So let's hope that you get assigned to their group. A few guidelines before we send you out in the breakout rooms. So we will have 5 rooms. You will be automatically and randomly assigned. Each room will have a moderator or facilitator. It's going to be me. It's going to be Claire, Olaf, my colleagues Paul Johnson, and Frank Minister is also going to take that role, who are also from the Open Access Working Group from LIBER. And what we want you to do is to respond to the questions that you got in the invitation email to this workshop. And we facilitators will show you on the screen and make notes for you so we can jointly respond to the questions. And no answers are too silly or too strange, so keep them coming. We will not be recording the session, so we will just be taking notes and sharing the notes afterwards. Also start by presenting yourselves and getting to know each other a little bit so that you feel comfortable. We will have until 11:45, so about half an hour. And then at 11:45, we have a short break. So we will meet again in the big room at 5 to 12, when we will do a little bit of a roundup before the last panel. And the last panel, I hope, also will be a little bit informed by the discussion. I was thinking there was something else I was going to say, but I'm a little bit scatterbrained today. So I hope you're going to be fine. And we will take care of you in the groups because we are curious to hear your voices as well. Okay, Athena and the LIBER team, would you mind dividing us into the breakout rooms now?
Yes, I will go ahead. So have fun, everyone.
Back now, I think so. Yes, welcome back to the main room. Hope you got at least a couple of seconds to stretch before we go into the next part of this workshop. I'd just like to share with you in LIBER, we like to share things. So we have created, I'm going to share my screen. We will be creating oh no, I can't do something and speak at the same time. Sorry about that. Okay, now I'm back in business. So yes, at LIBER, we always share the outcome of the workshops openly. So the outcome of this workshop will be published on Zenodo, and we will be sending a link to that to everyone. And this sharing also involves the comments from the workshop. So I just want to show you a little bit on what we accomplished so far here in the group. So presenting mode. So this is your comments that was entered in different ways. So the different business models or programs for OA books, lots of interesting stuff here. Open book publishers, knowledge unlatched, JISC supports OAPEN, freemium models. Also that different library consortia in our group. I'm not sure if the rest of you agree. We talked also about national or regional funding opportunity programs where you collaborate with a smaller publisher or local language publisher. Any comments on that? No? Yes?
I could comment, thanks,
Yeah,
Sophie, that I was really impressed with all the different models, because I wasn't aware of the big variety in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. This is a French Una editions, which I thought was really interesting, for example. And then we talked about the challenges in taking part in funding. And of course, we see a lot of challenges. That's why we're here, because we're trying to scratch our heads and figure this out. And of course, there's a pricing problem. BBCs can be very expensive depending on the publisher. And also libraries need to learn more on what the costs are for. How can we manage to pay for this type of model? Also, the burden is only on libraries. Maybe we should have some other collaborative model. Prestige comes up. I thought this was interesting as well. I think this is your comment, Martin, that if you have a small budget and at a department and you're asked to contribute to funding initiatives, and that might make you prioritize differently. So let's not buy these 5 books and just sponsor 1 book to become open access. Maybe that's not always a debate that you can have. Also funding initiatives for infrastructures, which is kind of slightly different from the pure publishing costs. Also that this is where reputational damage comes up. So let's say that you invest in a local infrastructure for OA books. Will those books be have the same value as books from a big publisher? Also that because there are repositories and initiatives, we talked a little bit about the initiative from University of Edinburgh that has built a platform, but it could also be a duplication of effort. So lots of challenges here. But at a workshop, we also want to, of course, have some kind of ideas for solutions. So what we thought in our groups that can be done to overcome these challenges is to lots of ideas here. Establish a separate budget to support open access programs, collaboration and not competition between initiatives. More conversations like workshops or seminars where we share experiences, but make sure that not only the usual suspects are represented. So invite broader conversations. And also infrastructure providers should be clear about what they offer and how it's used. So more transparency, I presume. Any comments about, did you find any solutions in your groups, my dear colleagues and facilitators? Anything that you want to highlight that you thought was something that we didn't think about? Maybe, maybe not. No.
We had one specific point that was quite interesting in our group, where we said libraries should also be role models in their own publication culture, because we found out that there are still a lot of, for example, subscription-based library journals around. So and only if we do the best practice ourselves, then we can also expect from researchers from other disciplines that they also follow our path, and that was quite an interesting point, I think.
Oh, well, very interesting. Joe DeVille also posted a note in the chat. In our group, I mentioned that I and my colleagues on the COPIM project have recently published a report looking at challenges libraries experience in supporting ebooks initiatives and how these challenges might be addressed. Excellent point, Joe, and thanks for the link. We will make sure to share that as well. Okay. So lots of ideas here, but Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was the open access movement. So I would like to turn to our expert panel and hear your thoughts about this. Olaf, would you like to take the reins from here?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. And I know Niels, Martin, and Alexandra, this was quite a lot of input from the mentee, and you couldn't find really time to digest everything, but maybe it's still a good starting point. And so first of all, I would like to have your comments about the different funding models that are obviously around in Europe. Do you think this is a surprise for you, or did you expect that? And maybe I'll start with Martin.
Yeah, I guess one of the themes that came up in our group time and time again was around who's attending these meetings and who is actually participating in these schemes, in these discussions, who's in the room. And so it's easy, I think, from our perspective to believe that everybody knows about open access books, everyone accepts their prominence and that they are a good thing in general. We were a little skeptical around this, and we thought about the need to bring this conversation to wider audiences, and we have been trying to do that for a decade and a half or more. But people who attend a LIBER workshop on funding open access books have a very specific take on this, and a lot of our discussion would be completely unintelligible to standard academics who just want to publish their books and do their research as they always have. So that was a large part of what we were talking about. And when we're talking about different models that are available, and what surprises us or what shocks us, we're going to have a very different perspective on that to people outside of library circles of funding open access books, even just general librarians in charge of purchasing models. So, yes, I'm marginally surprised that there's a variety of models proliferating through Europe, although I think this is a good time for experimentation. I think it's the right time for that. I just wonder, outside of our own echo chamber, I think that surprise would be amplified many, many, many times over. And we still have a lot to do to bring the benefits of OA books to people outside these walls, and then to articulate the funding models that are going to make that viable. And it's particularly challenging because I think we are going to see a proliferation of models at this point. We're going to see experiments. Some will work, some won't. We're going to see different types of thinking about how we can distribute the costs of OA books, whether that's from funders or whether it's from library budgets. But we need to bear in mind that most people just have no idea about any of this, and their surprise is going to be infinitely greater. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. When I come to the next question that we asked the participants, the challenges regarding funding programs. Alexandra, you are also now part of a university library, and when you look at that from your point of view, and also from the Enable point of view, how would you comment on the feedback regarding the funding problems for the participants?
I think it's a very difficult question because the funding situation of the libraries in the different countries is not the same on the same level. On the level of the budget, on the level of the regulations, how we could use our money, on our task. And for our university, or maybe for German University Library, it's to say that some of the challenges are just needs a cultural change. That's something I think we could manage in the next years. But some of the challenges are based on regulations on our institutions. So that is something that we can change in an easy way in the next months or years, because it has to do with our financial structure in the university and in Germany, and that should be changed on this level, on this institutional level or on the national level, and that needs more talking about, and that needs something that Martin just said, that the awareness for these models, for these problems should be more broader than it's just now.
Okay, yeah, thanks. When we look at the questions, the challenges for libraries and taking part in funding programs regarding infrastructure programs for hosting and distributing OA books. I mean, Niels, you are chair of OAPEN, and you are part of these one of these infrastructures who are open for library financing or membership models. How would you see the answers coming from the library community on that question?
Yeah, I think again it's a fairly good question, in the sense that I think it really relates to also what Alexandra and Martin said, that we are in a transitional process now where libraries have to find a new way to deal with publishers that provide, that propose, that offer things in a completely different way as in the transactional economy, right? So, and as I said in my presentation, what libraries do tend to be very and should be very well anchored within the strategic direction of the university or the faculty. And therefore, I think it's really crucial, and we discussed this in our group as well, that we engage at that level too, right? So that we ensure that that libraries get the right mandate to take fully part in this, because that will open up the budgets also. So I think many of the initiatives and the really goodwill of libraries to support open access books initiatives come out of, you know, whatever kind of money you can find in the library to show that you do support this. This is, however, of course, will this kind of support be sustainable in the long run for the infrastructures? We don't know. So we are very grateful to the libraries who support us. We have a horizon of 2 to 3 years of support, which is, of course, good to be in operation. But what happens beyond 3 years? And as an infrastructure that grows, we need to be sure that we can, you know, make plans that go much longer, so that the library community can rest assured that they can trust the services we provide today will also be there in 5 years and 10 years. So we have a good infrastructure that is robust and solid and will be there in the long run. So I think we should really focus, not forget, I mean, about the priorities of the library and that situation where the library is under pressure from the parent institution and from all the things that you want to support. And I think as we talked about communication and how to help each other, giving the libraries the strategic mandate and the backing for this is something we can, you know, help them with, and we'd be happy to do so.
Okay, thanks. So I'm now going back also to this financing question and going back to Martin, to your presentation, when you said there are like 3 different strata of offers from publishers, and when I take this back to the library world, I also think maybe there are also different sets of libraries, and academic libraries are not the same. They're very different. And Niels, you said that they are working within their environment of their patron institution. And would you say that question to Martin, would you say that, for example, only certain academic libraries are really able to support these open programs and open infrastructures, like large academic libraries that have a specific budget and a specific outreach of the patron institution, like a large university, that they are able to support these open programs, and like smaller smaller libraries of smaller academic institutions are not really able to take part in that? Can we separate that, or should we separate these groups?
I mean, I don't think we should say they can't participate. It really is a matter of institutional priority and strategic direction. But it's also to do with long-term versus short-term thinking. I mean, it seems absolutely clear to me that it's in the long-term interests of every library to get open access books to work at scale. There's a future world where every book is accessible to every library if we can get this to work, and that's somewhere we'd like to be. The challenge is, in the short term, a librarian at, say, my institution needs to provide local access to researchers for requests for specific material that they can't otherwise read. And they are on, the COVID has particularly caused institutional uncertainty with respect to finances. And we have to make strategic decisions about local relevance for where we spend that budget. And so the kind of thing I've been thinking through is, what proportion of a budget should be put aside for mission aligned support for OA initiatives? And there have been initiatives in the US, I think the 2% or whatever it was that was proposed at one point for OA. But we really need to start seeing that kind of transitional thinking where we say, yes, we understand the pressures you're under, but let's think about percentages of budgets that could start to be dedicated towards this and are reserved for that, for making that better world in the long term, while ensuring that small institutions are not just priced out.
Okay.
Because, yeah, you know, it's always harder for small institutions. They have less money.
But it's interesting the point you make that we have like separate budget for OA programs, and you have said that they should have like a specific percentage of the budget. But who should set this this rule? Should that be on the local level in the library, or should that be set, for example, in the ministry or on the national scale? Who is best positioned to do that?
Well, to be honest, I've always felt that when funders make a mandate for something, they should also stump up the cash to make it work. You know, so I have argued before that, say, the British government should be setting aside a portion of its funding stream for OA monographs at a central place to which researchers can apply, but they far prefer to delegate it to institutions and make it a problem of the market, which has proved very poor at coordinating to achieve OA books. So I don't think we're likely to see that kind of, you must set this portion aside. And I think it's a matter for each library to make that justification. I wish there could be more centralization, but I don't see it happening in the near future.
Yeah, okay. Niels, you want to add something?
Yes, related to this and related to the comment made by Graham Stone in the chat about the willingness to pay for infrastructures when it comes to OA books, or the not willingness. I think in the print world and also in the ebook purchasing world, you have a very solid, long-standing workflows and infrastructures and supply chains that have proliferated from profit margins from the publishers selling books to the libraries. So all libraries, small, big libraries, they would just expect that the supply chain is there because it's based on, some kind of, there's a profit going on behind the scenes. So now we come and say, well, we have a new landscape and these infrastructures are open, they should be community owned. You can influence, you can, all these things. But there you have to pay something to make sure that they are long-term sustainable. So I think that's a cultural shift we need to address somehow. And again, we need to be sure that, as Martin said, that the right people are in the room, and it's not the same people every time that agree to this. So I think that's a very good point, because I think also it's true that small academic libraries should be part in this owning, be part of the community owning these open infrastructures, these open initiatives, because that's equally important that we have the small libraries on board. And for instance, I saw how much, for instance, DOAJ is being used within the libraries. So DOAJ is a crucial tool for many, many librarians. And open science is open tools like this are, of course, come at a cost, but it could be covered by small university libraries just paying small fees, as well as big libraries, of course, paying more.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks a lot, and also thanks to Graham for this really interesting comment. I also think that there's something to it, and but there's also the question here. Who should set the rule here? And I think that this also refers to the budget of an institution, and here you also have like ministries involved and governments involved, and especially in Germany, for example, we have like specific budgets, for example, for library buildings and for shelving and stuff, but we don't have that for the digital world. And so this is something, I think it's rightly put, but maybe this should be then addressed at another level, so not in the library itself, but we can certainly take this with us for communicating that to other stakeholders.
Can I just add very briefly, Olaf, because I saw another comment in the chat from Karine Bacher, I can't see the full name, but referring to the French National Fund for Open Science. Yeah. So I think that's a very good example. We had a meeting and Opera's national event in the Netherlands this Tuesday, and Marin Daco from France, who is a counselor to the French ministry, he said quite clearly that open science is expensive, and that the French ministry did come up with a rather big fund to support open science initiatives, including infrastructures. So that's definitely, I think, a role model, and they have been helpful also for other governments in this respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think this was also this integration of other stakeholders, I think, was also part of the answers from the breakout groups. What do you think needs to be done to overcome the challenges? Is also to think of other stakeholders. Libraries can't do it on their own, is also somebody said in our breakout group. And yeah, but I think regarding the time, we now have to close the panel. Thanks for these interesting comments and answers you gave, and also to the people who took part in the chat and gave us some insights there as well. And then I would hand over to Sophia and Claire for the summary.
Yes, thank you so much. Clara and I have been thinking a bit about how to sum this up. I'm just gonna do a little bit of tech remodeling here to put us on the screen. I hope you don't mind, Claire. And then I'm going to share. I did make some notes in a presentation. I hope they represent the discussion so far. So it's an attempt of making conclusions. I might regret this, but so I'm putting it in presenter mode. So this is a couple of lines of what I've caught so far. Conclusion-wise, that collaborative models seem to be the most successful ones, because you get to talk to people, you get to think about what each model means for each community, and also trying to find ways to open up for conversations on all those levels, local, regional, national, that they're all important. So maybe no collaborative model is too small or too big. I've heard throughout the day that the cultural shift is crucial, not only to make arguments for the investments themselves, but also to ensure that the community is involved at all times. Well, all times, maybe I'm too ambitious, but anyway. And also making sure that it's possible to adjust costs or investments to the capacity of different stakeholders. So this one size fits all, or this is our flat fee, might not be working, because it depends on where you come from, what capacity you have. And also increased transparency and community involvement is key. That's what I caught anyway. Claire, do you agree?
Yeah, the themes definitely in the discussions I had were around these things, and definitely there's a need for transparency, and I think that will help with the relationships that we're trying to build around open access, and also a need for making the case that this is a long-term thing. This is not something, I mean, you said the phrase Rome wasn't built in a day, and that had come into my mind earlier, where this is a long-term piece of work, and therefore needs long-term vision in terms of funding approaches. And I agree with Martin that definitely there's a bias of people that are in this room. You know, we're all interested in open access and making it work. And I had in my breakout group Agnes Ponsati. I apologize if I've pronounced your name wrong, Agnes, but she's a librarian from Spain, and her to sum up what she said was that her institution sees the value of open science and already makes that a priority. And you know, it's just a term of deciding what to invest in and what the budget allows. And I wish that I don't know if that part has been recorded, but you know, that is the kind of thing that's very unique, I think, to this group, and obviously is like a model statement that we'd love to hear all libraries making, and that's a priority for their investments in open access. So you know, what I'm thinking about as for OASPA as an organization is what can we do to, you know, where do we go next? This is just one discussion. There's a challenge for signaling the benefits and continuing to raise awareness about different models, and that this needs to be, as I said, a long-term strategy for investing in libraries. And I've also, Niels, heard Maran speak recently about investment in open access infrastructure, open science infrastructure, and he was making the case for every BPC or APC that we put money into, the same should be invested in all of the alternatives that we need to make the open science system successful in the longer term. And that's, it can't be the leftover money in the long term. It needs to be a decisive strategy on both sides. So I think, there's opportunities for organizations like OASPA and LIBER to think about the outputs, and as you said right at the beginning as well, Niels, it's about communicating this and how we can do that effectively to reach those that are not engaged in these issues for various reasons. So that was my takeaway, Sophie.
Thank you. Just a question for those of you who are not involved. I happen to represent both sides in this story, or if there is sides, but I am a publisher of open access books, but also a part of a library. So I have one foot in LIBER and also is a little bit active in the OASPA organization. I'd like to, but for those of you who are mainly working in libraries, can you tell us, Claire, a little bit about the work in OASPA to expand sort of the idea on what publishing is? Because I think from a few years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, OASPA was sort of just about journals, but it's not anymore, is it?
No, it's definitely not just about journals. And yeah, so OASPA was founded in 2008, so it's been going for quite a long time now. And forgive me, I don't remember the year that books were added, because it was just prior to me joining the organization. And we have recently changed the name, actually, the acronym. So it's not even Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association anymore. It's Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association. And that's a signal of where we're taking OASPA, but of where we are now. So the supporting services and infrastructure portion of our membership is really significant. And all of these things are important to make open access work and be the model for the future that we want it to be on a predominant basis. So OASPA membership, the things I see it encompassing are anything related to publishing, and many organizations that don't think of themselves as publishers. So that was behind the change in the naming as well. But we've got all different kinds of journal models and books and university presses and scholar-led operations and and the infrastructure as well, which are all crucial to open access. And the diversity of models and approaches is the strength. I think OASPA represents what is out there at the moment, and we're not prescriptive about a way of doing it. The importance is on sharing what is working, what isn't working. Again, there's a huge importance on transparency within OASPA around all kinds of things, and it's critical to the way that we look at organizations before they join. So there's a vetting process where we're looking at how open organizations are being about themselves, what they're doing, how they're funded, and all of these preserving that diversity is really essential, and it's absolute priority.
Because if we want more conversations across stakeholder groups, maybe that is an opening then. Also, because I do appreciate that you started to collect data about open access book publishing on a larger scale and things like that, the things that we need to make those decisions. That is why I wanted to bring that up, that you're trying to create a more broad picture about what open access publishing services is.
yeah, and I can see there's a growing interest from libraries and institutions in our webinars, our conference. So we have quite a connection building there, and you know, I think I imagine that's from sometimes an educational understanding of what's happening in open access, and we make all of these things as open as we can. But I think there's, you know, that although we have this growing network and interest in what we're doing, it's connections with other organizations and us collaborating with those that have the same goal, but perhaps from a different perspective, and understanding each other is really essential as well.
Thank you, Claire. With that said, we just have a minute left. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating. The panelists were brilliant. Thank you so much. We tried to show a diverse picture. Thank you, my colleagues of the Open Access Working Group. You're amazing. Thank you, Claire, for joining us and for bringing in the publishing point of view. We really wanted that crossover. And thank you to all the participants for your wise words. I do appreciate the conversation going on in the chat. I'll try to make sure that is somehow represented when we are sharing the results of this workshop. I'm so grateful as always. Silly thing to say, but I agree with everything you say. But because there is no, you know, right way or wrong way, it's just different ways of doing it and different perspectives. And it does feel like we do have a common interest, and that should mean that we could make it work eventually, I hope. I don't know. So thank you so much for today. I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Stay healthy, or we're going to be out and about soon, and take care of each other out there.
Thank you to you, Sophie, and thanks everybody for joining.
And see you next year in Denmark.
Yes, see you next year.
Bye.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thanks.